a parallel to Juice in a sort of in a way over in the Apple world. I think we both have kind of a lot of the same shared goals about trying to make audio development easy and really trying to foster a community of people around the products that we make. It's a real honor to have him here. He's going to talk about the democratization of audio development, which, I mean, I used to think democracy was a good idea, and then 2016 happened, and we let people vote on stuff. I mean, I hope he's not going to sort of suggest that we vote on who's going to lead audio development or whether audio development is going to break away from the rest of development or not, because that could all go pretty pear-shaped. But so anyway, please, big hand for Aurelius.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction. Thanks for stealing some of my jokes from inside my talk. But yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak at this conference. It is a real honor. In this talk, I'm going to share with you some stories about how people can do incredible things and how they can make incredible progress and influence the world in ways above and beyond what you might otherwise expect of them. I'll start with some people we all know and then tell personal stories about my friends and hopefully entice you to take a similar approach to life. This man is Lloyd Reynolds. He was a professor of calligraphy at Reed College. He's one of the most important figures in the field of typography, not because he was the best or the most innovative. No, it's because he was a teacher. And one of his students was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs had recently dropped out of Reed College, but was still hanging around, going to classes that he still found interesting. Lloyd Reynolds taught Steve Jobs about typefaces, ligatures, proportionality, and years later, when the Mac came out, it was the first computer with beautiful typography. This is my favorite example of the democratization of a technology, in particular, a democratization of an artistic technology. To clarify that word democracy, it's not meant as what the United States used to believe in, but rather the action of making something accessible to everyone. Now, accessibility doesn't just mean availability, but also usability and utility. On the Mac, it wasn't just that users were able to read documents in a nice typeface, but they could compose their own documents in those same typefaces. And it goes deeper than that. Developers of applications could rely on operating system toolkits that included font support. And deeper than that, with the introduction of PostScript to allow people to make hard copies of their documents, and TrueType that enabled font creators to build distributable fonts. These are interlinked technologies that had to be invented and made available and accessible in order to pave the way for beautiful typography on the computer. Let's keep this story in the back of our minds while we move the discussion into the world of audio. And what better place to begin than the Audio Developers Conference? But let's start 2 years ago. Roger Lynn was giving the ADC keynote then. For those of you who don't know Roger Lynn, he is the creator of the first drum machine that used samples, the Akai MPC sampler. He's the Lynn in Lynn Drum, Lynn Sequencer, Adrenaline, and now his MP controller, the Lynstrument. He's a huge innovator and a major influencer of pop culture. When Roger gives a keynote, he doesn't need a talk title. He's just Roger Lynn being Roger Lynn. Roger had no slides that day, but if he had, it might have looked like this. In Roger's worldview of audio, everything before about 1975 was the era of expressive acoustic instruments. Then came the era of on and off switches. Roger represents this time as a low point in expressivity because of the limitations of MIDI and the electronics of the time, which is kind of ironic because this is when Roger Lynn's devices changed the course of music history. And so many great things came out of that. But it takes someone like Roger, who's a forward thinker, to not just rest on his laurels. He was looking ahead into the future, and he believes that we're in the early days of the new era of expressive electronic instruments, with new devices like the Continuum, the Lynstrument, and of course the stunning Rolly Seaboard and Rolly Blocks. But also the adoption of standards in MIDI, like capability inquiry, polyphonic expression that has to be in place to support these new devices. If you build it, they will come, is a fairy tale. You need to build it really well, keep the price reasonable just to get users, and you have to pave the way for developers to make software that the new devices can control. It's a process of making it fruitful for everyone to agree to embrace progress. And Roger called that process the democratization of music and audio technology. That seems like a good talk title. I don't think I stole this talk title from Roger, but I sort of wanted his blessing anyway, so I sent him an email. And he was intrigued by my talk as a sort of a sequel to his, and he wanted me to run it by him. So I did. And he was really gracious with his time. He helped me improve, or perhaps Lynn prove this talk. I offered to him to, as a thank you, if he wanted to deliver you any kind of message. And then the next day I got this in email.
Hi, Roger Lynn here, and I'm sorry I can't attend ADC this year. I very much enjoyed my visit and giving my presentation 2 years ago at ADC. It's, for me, very personally gratifying to be able to speak to such a bright and creative audience as exists at ADC. But I'm sure you are enjoying Ari's talk on the democratization of audio development. I think he has some very interesting ideas, and I'm impressed with his AudioKit. I think it's a very nice contribution to the body of tools available to audio developers, and I hope you take the time to check that out. I would like to conclude with an expressive performance, a short one. As you know, I have my Linstrument controller, which is an expressive controller for synthesis, and I know that you're at this conference, which is sponsored by Rolly, who makes also some very fine products in that regard. So I'm going to perform an expressive performance, that is to say, of the first solo verse of Django Reinhardt's immortal minor swing. So here it goes.
So I'm glad that people laughed because we were worried. Yeah, thank you, Roger. Some of the people I showed the talk to were worried that you wouldn't know that Roger's always playing the instrument, and you can find many hundreds of hours of him playing it online. But going back to the timeline, I like timelines. I like looking at things historically. It's ironic because I didn't like history in school. History teachers like to say, those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. That could be true, but what motivates me more would be something more like, know your history so you can identify when something is lost or forgotten, and you can have an opportunity to remedy the situation, remedy that loss. For the typography timeline, typography evolved naturally and then was stunted by the limitations of the computer, and then later corrected by Apple. For Roger, Lynn, and possibly a lot of people in this room, instruments were going along fine, and then the limits of electronics and MIDI diminished some expressivity, and now that is being corrected. The pattern here is that all of human history is evolving and improving up to a point, and then a young technology emerges and limits the heck out of stuff. And then the technology improves, and those limitations are no longer there, but it takes someone to come along and remind us, hey, we can go back to the good old days. The timeline that drives me deep down inside revolves around the turn of the century. Not this one, but the last one. This was a time when music was only available in a live setting. And then it became available as a recorded medium. And the medium doesn't matter to me too much, whether it's radio, records, digital, streaming, it's irrelevant. You think about in the last few years how musicians were all up in arms about how people were downloading their music and how disrupted the industry was. But if you want to talk about disruption, think about how the demand for musicians, local talent, went way, way down when you could play on the radio or on a record the very best musician, recorded in the best studio, on the best instruments, and they only kept their best takes. How can a local musician compete with that? Given that none of us were alive back then, we can't really remember what was lost, but we could imagine what it was like back then. What would be the value of music if it wasn't reduced to a recorded facsimile of itself? Now you could argue that that's water under the bridge. We can't go back to the old days. Everybody has a recording device in their hands, and GarageBand is a pretty good, high-quality recording studio. When everyone can record easily and record really well, what's next? Just more of the same? I don't think so, because there are other factors in play as well. Remixing of music is a huge industry, and the availability of stems, people are getting used to the idea of different versions of the same song. There are nonlinear narratives of video games that are getting more and more interesting, and those stories need to be scored for emotional impact. And we have quickly improving augmented reality, and sound, to me, is an important part of reality. So, you know, video games and augmented reality are dynamic media, and music needs to be as well. What I'm hoping for is a future of dynamic, really dynamic, living, breathing, attention-grabbing music that's reactive to its own setting. I'm going to play a little excerpt from Brett Victor's talk, Stop Drawing Dead Fish. In this talk, he's advocating utilizing the power of the computer to go beyond what could have been accomplished before the computer was invented.
For music, for sculpting, for film editing, we're creating these things in here instead of their native media. This gives us a powerful new way of working, but they're not new art forms. They're old art forms created in new ways. What does this art medium provide that no medium in the past had ever provided? And I believe that the answer to that is simulation. Digital characters can behave and respond. Behavior and responsiveness is the essence of the computer as an art medium. And what that means is that anytime we create art that doesn't have behavior, we're not living up to the potential of the medium.
Now, Brett is focused on animation for this talk. And in the clip, he started off sort of dismissing music as an old art form. But to me, it's not an old art form. I think everything he said is just as valid for music, because I think it's an evolving art form. Now, I don't dare put a date on this part of the timeline. The challenges are going to be too great for me to make a prediction. The only way we have a chance of doing this is if we're all involved, and the only way to do that is through democratization. So what I'm going to do now is bring things down a bit from this super idealistic dream. And it's great to keep your dreams in your heart to drive you and in your mind while you make decisions, but you also have to be practical. You have to make an impact where you can, and right now I focus all my attention on the AudioKit framework. I'm curious, how many people here have never heard of AudioKit before this conference? That's actually good news for me. I'm pleasantly surprised. If you don't know what AudioKit is, you will by the end of this talk. But if I just came out and just told you on bullet lists like how AudioKit's great, I think you'd miss the takeaway message, which is all about the journey. Like all good superhero origin stories, AudioKit has a very humble root. I don't have this grand vision. I didn't have this grand vision of what AudioKit could become and then methodically work to make it happen. In fact, I was only interested in being a better musician. I started to do a lot of ear training, which is really dull. And I tried to make it more interesting by turning it into a video game. And I showed this suite of ear training games to some friends of mine from the MIT Media Lab, and they felt they could use the same basic approach in their own research. In particular, it was research on the effect of music and audio on the brains of elderly patients, and some of whom were in various stages of Alzheimer's. These are two very different audio applications. And what I did was to extract the generic audio code out of my games so that it could be used in the healthcare app. And that engine became the AudioKit framework. And we all saw benefits to our projects from using AudioKit. We got control, fine control over the audio, interesting audio, tight integration with our application logic, and we were able to work faster. We knew there was value there, even beyond our projects. In fact, the importance of our projects was sort of shrinking, and we saw the value of the toolkit growing. What do you do with something that has value? You start a business around it, right? But I'm just a guy from Caltech. Caltech is a science school. We don't even have a business school. We don't even know business school people. And I don't have any interest in business, really, deep down. I even have sort of a distaste for it because of a bad .com experience. On the other hand, the MIT Media Lab folks were really good at this. And part of their curriculum is pitching ideas to sponsors. They made Guitar Hero, one of the top 9 Media Lab innovations. It's not even an innovation. It's a reskinning of an already successful game genre in Japan, now with American rock music. So surely they would be able to figure out a way to fund an innovative AudioKit startup, right? Well, for an entire year, I waited. I kept AudioKit closed source while VCs were pitched and networks were reached out to. But this was all happening after the .com bust, and the VCs had all sobered up. It was a painful year, but I didn't give up on AudioKit. I was writing tutorials and example projects privately. And one day when one of the venture capitalists that were being pitched said, you know, if this is so valuable, why don't you open source it? And that was like the final validation for what I wanted to do all along. And in November 2014, AudioKit was open sourced. And like a newborn child, the newborn AudioKit was, you know, compared to what it is today at least, was much smaller, much less capable, and a less experienced version of itself. But it had a kind of DNA already. I wanted AudioKit to be used by a lot of people, regardless of their wealth. So AudioKit had to be free. I wanted AudioKit to grow, and I wanted to have help fixing bugs, so it had to be open source. I had troubles learning other audio tools, so AudioKit had to be easy to learn, and I wanted to write in a very high-level language to get sound out. And my music education apps were still in the back of my mind, so I needed playback and synthesis of sounds, effects processing, MIDI, and I wanted to be able to track pitch. So I need microphone and audio input. So it's a pretty full-featured set of requirements there. And to give you a sense for how these last two in particular manifest themselves in code, this is what a simplified modern AudioKit program looks like. You'll notice it's in Swift. It could also be in Objective-C, but with more brackets. It's quite Englishy, with an aversion to abbreviation. And in this short block, you see synthesis, processing, and analysis components. Now, just putting AudioKit into the world with these characteristics is not what taught me about democratization. Democratization doesn't happen by itself. You have to work at it. Managing an evolving code base is hard work. And what I learned was actually taught to me by these guys. Now, I have a team now, and we have users. And collectively, we've done so many things I could never have accomplished on my own. I could point to anyone on this screen and sing their praises. Paul Baxter is responsible for replacing the internal sound engine with his sound pipe, which has stuff from Faust and Stanford's synthesis toolkit in it. Stefan Peter manages our releases. Dave O'Neill has added some precision sequencing tools. Adam Nemechek has the distinction of removing more lines of code than he's added. And Shane and Jeff both they added different flavors of samplers, amongst many other things. And I just want to say both Shane and Jeff are here. Wave or something. There's Shane. Jeff may have, oh, there he's in the back. These guys are as much on the stage today as I am. And you'll get to meet more people from this list shortly. In fact, one of our biggest learning experiences, aside from building the framework, is creating a product called AudioKit Synth 1. Matt Fetcher is the brainchild behind this, and he discovered AudioKit a while back and started to contribute example code that was previously written in Objective-C, and he translated it to Swift. He decided AudioKit was a framework and a community that resonated with him, and he decided to build a new synthesizer with AudioKit. But I'd like to let Matt introduce the synth to you.
Hello there. For the past 2 years, we've had a crazy dream. The dream of creating the world's first free and open source professional synth for the iPad. No ads, no in-app purchases, nothing to buy. This is gonna be free for everyone. But building something like this wasn't easy. Over 100 people volunteered their time, including sound designers from the biggest names in music and app developers who have sold hundreds of thousands of apps in the App Store. But why do we need this? There was something I learned that shocked me. There's millions of people in the world with iPads that can't even afford $5 or $10 for a music app. Millions of people receive free iPads from schools and other charity organizations. Many don't even have credit cards, putting even a 99-cent app out of reach.
It's a humbling and exciting experience.
This has been a labor of love with no financial sponsors. We built this without any Kickstarters or any financial investors.
So many people worldwide have donated their time and effort to make this beautiful sounding app.
I like that clip because I think it provides you a good background of the kind of people that I work with, what they're like. And we're committed to not only the open sourcing of our framework, but also the open sourcing of professional grade applications that are built with AudioKit. And so what I'm going to do for the rest of this talk is attest to and advocate for the democratizing of your audio tools like we have ours. I'll share some of our goals, lessons, and some solutions we've come up with, some of the struggles we're still working through. And I'm going to start off at a very high level and work my way down. The highest level of application development, in my opinion, is how the user interacts with what you've built. This is a beautiful rendering of a classic guitar effect pedal. It is quite literally a black box. A lot of you probably know what effect this is right away. If you don't, does this help? It's the classic digital reverb pedal. But is this the best representation of a reverb that can be delivered to the user? Reverb was black. What's blue? Well, apparently compression is blue. In a lot of ways, this wasn't even a good interface when it was a device. I know a lot of guitarists who don't have any sense for how the sound will change when they tweak the knobs, but they have good ears, so they know what they like when they get to it. But they're not really, it's more of a guessing game when they're using this device. A reverb is the sound of an instrument in a space. And even though this interface on the right is flat and the one on the left is skeuomorphic, the flat one is actually more representative of the effect that it's allowing you to control. And in this example, reverb is sculptable within a space. And using the interface involves using your fingers, your eyes, and your ears together to establish a real sense of connection and a sense of control over the effect. Listening to audio while modifying compression with your hands and seeing what happens to the waveform with your eyes, again, reinforces your learning. Reverb and compression and basically everything in audio are real, inherently real things. It's much better to have representational graphics around the actual phenomenon than to have a skeuomorphic display of what happened to be a device that did that effect in the past. I feel like that's a missed opportunity to gain expertise in something users care deeply about. I mean, we're all guilty of it to some extent. In AudioKit, we have lots of knobs that aren't really knobs. They don't turn. They're basically sliders that are stay in one place. But we want to have some degree of familiarity. And for instance, these ADSR plots, they're actually touchable. But there are a lot of videos of people using Synth 1 on YouTube, and I've never seen any of them use anything but the knobs. The struggle between paving the future and honoring the past is an interesting one, and appears on several levels. At NAMM a couple years ago, there was a panel discussion entitled Sound Synthesis, Present and Future. Oscar Caraballo was the moderator, and esteemed members of the Sound Synthesis Club were the panel. Oscar asked each panelist to answer the question, what do you think is the greatest challenge ahead? Frederick Brun, the CEO of Arturia, who I know is a sponsor, answered, we are running out of synthesizers to emulate. That's the biggest problem for his future. Now, you can actually take that two ways. Yeah, my initial reaction, like some people in the audience, it's kind of humorous. My initial is a little bit of shock. Surely we can do better with all this modern technology than to emulate the past. But actually, the joke might have been on me. Because remember, I'm not a businessman. Frederick Brun is. It's equally likely, perhaps more likely, that he was just wryly telling us a cold, hard fact that the market was only demanding emulation. And what's the problem with emulation? Well, you can go overboard, especially to the point where you're reproducing the problems of the past rather than correcting them. One of the reasons I like the user interfaces that give the user more information is because I like to think of this all as one big slippery slope. But a musician who's looking at an interface with no information is being told to stop right there. This is as far as we're going to let you go, and the rest is magic that's not accessible to you. Allowing the musician to graduate from being a knob twiddler to a waveform sculptor is more welcoming, gives the musician respect, and teaches them kind of what's going on, and maybe even gives them the confidence to go one step lower. I see what this effect is doing, but I think it should do something more like this. I wonder how I can make this happen. Could I program my sounds and effects, my own sound and effects? Most of us were at this position at some point in our careers. And when I was just getting curious about sound programming, I turned to pure data. And you can see why it's kind of appealing. You're used to plugging wires into effects pedals, so the box line drawing metaphor does not feel like much of a jump. On the other hand, the reason I didn't stick with pure data was that it didn't resonate with me on either my real life level or the programmer level. Aside from the lines and boxes, it still looks like code with all the unfriendly abbreviations and hieroglyphics the programmers like to do. I resisted putting a slide up that was a really nasty PD patch because those are the fault of the programmer, not pure data itself. But when compared to language-based programming, I found visual programming harder to read, harder to document, harder to integrate with other projects, and most of all, sharing, collaborating, and doing version control was problematic. What I do like about this program is the immediacy of interaction. If you have audio coming through a line and you're connected to a digital analog converter node, then when you make changes to the signal flow, you'll hear the difference straight away. The thing is, that interface is not a necessary ingredient for that outcome. And you can approximate that kind of immediacy with AudioKit's Swift playgrounds. This is a very simple playground demonstrating delay code. And it's a video, so you'll be ready with the audio. By wearing headphones while you do this and processing your voice, you can get a sense for what changing the code is like and get quick feedback about what you're doing. One way to develop an effect chain is to have it process your voice. This is my voice with reverb, and I can change parameters in the code and pretty quickly hear the results. If I add a delay effect, it will repeat what I say exactly once. I can use UI components to bring up the feedback parameter, which increases the number of PPP. And the really interesting part is the time parameter, which can do things like pitch shifting, robotic voices, and other unexpected effects. And when you're done with that playground, if you like your signal chain, you can just copy and paste that code into your app. Of course, this isn't good enough, but it's a start. And I want to see playground environments attached to all my code in lots of different levels. You know, when I was asked to speak here, I didn't know what to make of it. Presumably, it's mostly JUICE users, even with the ADC renaming, not AudioKit users. But actually, Jules and I, we're not enemies. I don't think our goals are even at odds. On the contrary, I think we're soulmates. You know, with Soul, I really see an endeavor for the greater good of all audio developers. And it's something I really want my community of friends to benefit from too. So I'd like to commit to AudioKit being the go-to Swift implementation of Soul, and I would love to offer my help in any way possible, including offering AudioKit's DSP as an open source library in Soul, as Soul patches or whatever you end up calling it. What do you say, Jules?
I say thank you very much. We would be absolutely delighted to get you guys involved in Soul. It'd be
All
wonderful
right,
stuff.
thank
So
you.
thank you so much for that.
So now, especially with Soul, we're gently lowering a new programmer down deeper and deeper into code, continuously smoothing out the step to the next level, now including the DSP level. And once you have people familiar with your code, you can get an amazing thing, which is contributors. For me, one such contributor is Marcus Hobbs. And if Roger Lynn is the expressivity guy, Marcus is the microtonality guy.
Hi there, my name is Marcus Hobbs, and I'm a developer, an electronic musician, and a contributor to AudioKit. And my passion is microtonality. Microtonality is the art and science of creating a palette of musical pitches. I found AudioKit so that I could build a microtonal synth and focus on the scales instead of the sound synthesis. I was pleasantly surprised when Ari welcomed my microtonal features to AudioKit, and I started to work with Ari and Matt on Synth 1. My greatest delight with Synth 1 was the community of sound designers who created the gorgeous presets. I'm just very excited about the future, to hear the microtonal music made with Synth 1 and the next generation of microtonal software synthesizers that will be enabled by Synth 1 source code, empowered by AudioKit.
So I just want to point out that in addition to writing the DSP for Synth 1, Mark's made a really nice tuning panel, which is, I really like, for the previous discussion about UIs, because this really nicely shows the character of a scale or of a tuning, and especially in comparison to what equal temperament looks like, and with a quick glance. And it's not something you could do in a emulation sort of way. It has to be on a modern device. So Synth 1 has become one of the most downloaded, if not the most downloaded synth ever created for iPad. And through Marcus's efforts with microtonality, it's in the hands of over 130,000 musicians worldwide, last check. You know, he made a convert out of me. I had never known about these scales, and now I'm like, of course, the tuning selection is super important when you're defining a musical creation. How could it not be? But he's got now these tools in so many more people's hands. It was his passion that he's bringing to a lot of other people. So again, we have this process of democratization paying dividends, like typography, expressivity, dynamicism. Tonality is well within the capabilities of modern computers now. We don't need to accept the compromises of the past. And any AudioKit powered synth can be made microtonal thanks to Marcus's contributions. Another contributor who happened to be at WWDC that year too was Ryan McLeod. Ryan makes a game called Black Box. If he looks especially happy here, it's because he just had won the Apple Design Award that day. Black Box is an infuriating game in which your phone's touchscreen interface rarely has an important place in solving the puzzle. You have to use all the other stuff in your phone, like GPS, gyroscope, your Wi-Fi antenna. He has audio puzzles that involve imaginative repurposes of the microphone, speakers, headphone jack, pitch detection, and he uses AudioKit for all that stuff. Black Box is probably the single largest user base, or installed app user base of AudioKit. Those sheer numbers and the fact that his puzzles often push strange edge cases makes it a great testbed for AudioKit. So we were really happy when we got to see that AudioKit was stable over such a wide number of people. And not only that, but Ryan became a part of our discussion forums to solve a few of his own issues, but he didn't leave when they were solved. He made code updates to AudioKit that everyone benefits from, and he's really helpful when users have questions with hardware-related problems. He didn't have to do that, he just does. One final point about user contributions. So once you're accepting user contributions, you do need to make sure you have a good testing framework with unit tests and continuous integration. Having come from the web development world, I'm really surprised how little testing there is in audio. I know it can be hard. AudioKit's first tests were about 5 minutes of sweeps and physical model chirping that I would have to listen to occasionally to make sure I didn't break anything. But Paul helped me change that. Paul Basser helped me change that to do it all super fast in memory and make everything sample accurate testing. So far I've only talked about software, and we've descended all the way down to unit tests. So I'd like to show you a few of the hardware innovations that use AudioKit.
Think about all the accomplishments. I can see you watching me. Approach everyone positive, but if you can't forget fam, you're not the man.
Creating music can really trigger creativity in young people. That's why McDonald's in the Netherlands introduced McTracks, a paper placemat turned into a full music production station. By the use of conductive ink on a piece of paper, we connected our placemat to your smartphone. Every touch point triggered a full sound bank to kickstart your creativity.
Let's go, let's go.
Just select the beat and you're good to go. Create your own sounds and melodies.
Ik ben goud. Ik ben goud.
Then you can tweak your track with any kind of effects. You can even record your own vocals.
To the menu, I can get you something too. Hey, my hidden beats play what you say.
That's how you play the placemat.
Dit is heel gruwelijk.
And this is how we challenge your talent by showing your music skills at McDonald's.
So, what a weird world. Now, I'm sure a lot of you might be wondering, like, how real is that? So I brought one. They sent this to me, and I was like, it kind of works too. It's definitely a commercial, so they've made everything sound better than it is in real life. But you know, they actually built this and did the printing and distributed it for a couple days at McDonald's. So kind of a bizarre thing. But you could also consider it sort of a democratization, because who would expect to get a musical instrument on your placemat? And here's one more. So it's great to be able to enable innovative people who are experts in hardware to allow them to focus on that part of their world and not worry so much about the software side. Now, watching young kids get turned onto music is inspiring, but it's even better when I see them get turned on to audio programming. These are students from the Zhejiang University in China who built an AI-powered music app built with AudioKit. They are Apple WWDC scholarship winners. This Modular synth was created by Grant Emerson. He's a 15-year-old from Florida. He learned AudioKit and built this synth in 5 months while attending school. He's been to the last 2 WWDCs on scholarship. And M-Tonal is an app by Shashank, a 14-year-old, who was composing microtonal music, specifically quarter tone music, and there was no app that he could find that fit his needs, so he built his own. We love hearing from young people, and we feel really good about having inspired them. And we want to continue doing that, and we want to continue to be, we want AudioKit to be self-sustaining. We want to make sure that AudioKit's free and open source apps remain free and continue to compile on the latest devices and latest operating systems and continue to improve over time. The first step was to develop the AudioKit community, and the next step that we're trying out is releasing our first fundraising product, which is the AudioKit Digital D1 hybrid synth. Again, this was created mostly by Matt, especially in terms of the graphics, but he got a lot of help from the rest of the AudioKit community, Shane and Jeff included. And once again, we used all the sound designers from Synth 1. You want to try to put that back up?
I'm going to try to put it back. Made us stick. Sorry.
No problem. So it really does a lot of effects and has 2 signal chains, but I'd rather just play a little bit of it. So the response to this synth has been pretty incredible. We didn't know what we were going to get. We didn't know if people were going to be angry that we were giving away these free synths, and now we offer one that's paid. But our users, pretty much they get it. People on their own have realized that one company was responsible for 3 apps that they like, and the total cost to them was under $10. Strangely enough, people are more willing to tell us about certain things. One person reported a problem and added that, oh, it's broken in your other apps too. And why didn't you tell us that before? They probably didn't want to bother us because it was open source and free, but the opposite was true. We'd really like to put AudioKit through its paces on the free apps, so it's well tested for the paid apps. So the toolkit is actually benefiting quite a bit from having a paid app as well, because of the increased scrutiny. We've already built some of the fixes into Synth 1 from D1, and we're being super responsive for improvements, as well as with like making some upcoming enhancements like the dual sequencer and the ability to synchronize the tuning to Synth 1's microtonal scales. And we're working on a scale linking project tentatively called AudioKit in Tune, which will allow any app on the network to subscribe to and conform to a common tuning. Here's a quick demo of 3 linked apps. This will work with not just with AudioKit apps, but any MP compatible synths. And of course, it'll be free and open source for everybody. Contact me or anyone from AudioKit if you're interested in this. So I don't know yet if our business plans will work out, but I do know that AudioKit hasn't been around for that long, and we couldn't be more honored to be already mentioned alongside some of these companies. Much for us being represented on 2 different apps. It's quite nice. And there's more to come in 2019. So I'm coming to the close of my talk, and I think I have time to tell a couple stories. On the way to the airport to come to this conference, I needed some like dongles and stuff for my computer. So I stopped at the Apple store, and I noticed that the new iPads were out, so I checked them out. And there was nothing on the iPads except for the stock apps. And I asked one of the employees, why is this? And I said, oh, you know, when a developer wants to get an app in the store, you have to be invited, and they have to create a special version of that app, and then we have to get that special version. And I was like, yeah, I know. I submitted one of them, and I'm looking for it. I always said, oh, yeah. What kind of app was it? I said, oh, it's a synthesizer. I said, oh, yeah. I'm a musician. What app is it? What synth is it? I said, AudioKit, figuring that was enough information. He said, oh, I really love AudioKit. So I was like, he might just be trying to sell me something. So I don't know if he really knows AudioKit. So I looked at him with some skepticism, and he goes on, and he says, AudioKit 1 is my favorite synth. Like, well, he's got the number 1 in there, so but it's not 1, it's synth 1 or D1, so I still didn't quite give him the benefit of the doubt. But then he said, it's amazing that you made it open source. And I just gave him a handshake and a quick hug, because that's exactly the kind of thing I like to experience. It's great to be on a list like this, but also great to like touch someone that you've never met before and have them be a fan right away. Remember this slide? This was all about when it was closed source. I can't help but think how bad it would have been had I kept AudioKit closed source, had we got funded. With funding, I definitely wouldn't have had to learn so much on my own, and I wouldn't have developed opinions about the way things should work. Probably would just hire someone who was good at the tools at the time. I don't think I would have found the same caliber of passionate collaborators who are doing all this work for free I know I wouldn't have the amazing set of AudioKit friends that I do. And of course, I wouldn't be standing here today telling you my story. And for all these things, I'm extremely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really, really great talk, super inspiring.
Thanks.
Wonderful to hear that stuff. We have time for a few questions. Who wants to start? Really? Nobody? You're kidding. What?
Maybe this is a standard question for open source development. I wonder, how do you get your income, and what do you do for that?
Yeah, so that's what we're starting to look at. We have our first paid app out, and we're seeing how well that can support ourselves. Like I said, we don't know exactly what our business plan is, but I think it'll be really cool to have a suite of free apps and paid apps that we release on a regular basis, and have kind of a situation where people get turned on to one app and they may say, oh, you've got 5 other apps, and it kind of builds itself as a sustaining income. This D1 has been out for a month, and tomorrow is like Black Friday, so maybe I'll know more then. Or well, not tomorrow, but a couple days. So yeah, we sometimes we do consulting projects, and we're hoping to convert that more into product, because we don't always want to be trading our time for time that could be spent on a toolkit to work for someone else's dreams. Anyone else?
Good morning. Thanks for the talk. Is there a relationship between AudioKit and C-Sound language?
Sorry?
Is there a relationship between AudioKit and C-Sound?
Sure.
Yes.
C-Sound was the original engine for AudioKit. It was kind of based on, C-Sound has really old algorithms and has a kind of old language. And I like the sounds, but I hated the language. So I wrote wrappers in Objective-C at the time for C-Sound. And the first version of AudioKit was called Objective-C Sound, in fact. And then we went by, but my problem with C-Sound, I mean, I could give a whole talk about this, is that C-Sound has this, they have this mantra or this way of doing things where you can't change very much about their code, because they want to make sure anything written in that language is going to continue to sound the same on future versions. So if you found bugs, they wouldn't really fix them, because they'd be like, well, it's going to change somebody's code somewhere. Some academic's going to have a piece that's going to sound different. So that was unacceptable. I didn't like working in that community. And then Paul Batchelor had SoundPipe, and he converted a lot of the C-Sound algorithms that we liked into his stuff. So we started to use that instead and never looked back.
Question in front.
Two small questions. First, are there any reason other than historical that you stick on the Apple platform? And second, do you have any plan to go on other platforms like Android, Windows?
Well, a lot of AudioKit's core code is cross-platform. I know Shane's built a Windows VST in AudioKit, and but the top level being Objective-C and Swift, that was just because that's what I started using first. I'm looking forward to having things inside of it be more cross-platform thanks to Soul too. So I'm not like an Apple-only guy, but it's been good enough so far. I would like to see it. I'd like to see Swift adopted in more places, and then I could focus on that more. So, yeah.
Any more?
Hi there. I'm wondering if I can be so bold as not to make a question, but to answer a previous question. I contributed the sample engine that's used in D1, basically because I had a need for one in another situation. I never expected to get a penny out of it. I've just enjoyed working with Ari and the rest of the group and so on. But I'm very happy to say that this year, apparently, AudioKit is buying me a new Mac Mini from the new series. So, which is really going to change my life because my old Mac is very slow. And so, yeah, maybe we're not earning a living out of it, but that's only one app. That's the first one. And so I'm actually cautiously optimistic that we may go somewhere.
You deserve a lot more than one Mac Mini.
5 Mac.
Any more? Let's see. Okay, well, it's 10 o'clock, so let's call it a day, and let's give a big hand once again for Aurelius.